Hi everyone, I'm Bria and welcome to my channel Tales of Tales. So today we're going to talk about some 5-star predictions. Now, I don't think I've ever talked on this channel about what really makes a 5-star a 5-star for me, right? For some people, the book needs to be a work of art. It needs to be really well written. It needs to have plot. It needs to have character. It needs to have all of these things, right? For me, I'm a little simpler, okay? I just really need to enjoy the book, and there are certain tropes and just things in books that I just tend to gravitate towards. And with that, you would think that I'm handing out 5 stars left and right, like I'm Oprah, like you get 5 stars, you get 5 stars, you get 5 stars. And that's not necessarily the case. Like, the book just has to have that little extra something, for me to give it 5 stars. So today's list was a little hard for me to put together, but I have faith in my ability to know what I like, I guess. So we're going to talk about 10 books that I think are going to be 5-star predictions. So let's start with sci-fi and fantasy. Sci-fi and fantasy is like my bread and butter, okay? That is the genre that I tend to gravitate towards the most. The genre that, it has my heart, okay? Because I feel like you can just do so much with sci-fi and fantasy, especially sci-fi and fantasy that's really close to our current reality, right? And so the first book that I'm going to talk about is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. So Octavia E. Butler, she's my girl, okay? All the books I've already read by her, I've given 5 stars. Okay, so I've read Dawn this year, absolutely phenomenal, and I know it's gonna be on my top 10 list of the year already. And I've also read Kindred, which, if you ask me, is probably one of my favorite books of all time, and I read that years and years ago. So I have a lot of faith in my girl Octavia. So Octavia E. Butler always writes books that are not too far off from reality, in my opinion. She really intertwines like history and, some tangible sci-fi elements into her books, which just makes them really gripping and really ahead of her time. So Parable of the Sower takes place in 2025, which I'm a little nervous that it's so close. So this book takes place in California, where communities have to wall themselves off from these scavengers who have this like innate desire to kill, and it's from this drug that they're taking. And so within the story, we're following a 15-year-old who has this ability to feel other people's pain and sorrow. Octavia E. Butler, she does write hard topics really well, so I'm definitely excited to get into the Parable of the Sower. Okay, so another thing that I really love in books is like secret magical worlds. I love kids in a school setting, and I haven't read a lot of middle grade, but I've heard a lot of good things about this book, and that is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. In Amari and the Night Brothers, we're following Amari, and her brother has gone missing, and she starts to get a clue about maybe what's happened to him when she finds a ticking briefcase in the closet, and it's a briefcase that has like an invitation to this secret magical society. And so she takes this briefcase and she ends up having to compete for a spot in this like secret organization against other kids, and she thinks that this organization is the key to finding her brother. It's got kids competing for stuff, and it's got secret magical organization, and it just seems like it's something up my alley. So in the same vein of kids at schools, we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And so anytime I try to explain this book, I'm not gonna lie, I can't do a good job of summing it up. So I am just going to read a little bit off the back. And it says, when war orphan Rin aced the empire-wide test to find the most talented youth to learn at the academies, she surprised everyone, test officials, the guardians who wanted to marry her off and further their criminal enterprise, and even herself. Rin's shamanic powers may be the only way to save her people, yet as she discovers more about the god that has chosen her, the vengeful phoenix, she fears that winning the war may cost her humanity. So, we got a war. We got a school where she's learning how to be in a war. And, this just seems like a really epic type of fantasy, and those are usually type of fantasies that I am drawn towards. You know, the chosen one, things where you're probably going to have some type of coup against the government, which is what it sounds like anytime that there is a war going on. So yeah, I am super excited to get into the Poppy War. All right, and one more that talks about kids competing and stuff is All of Us Are Villains by Amanda Foody and Christine Lynn Herman. So a lot of people compare this book to The Hunger Games, and The Hunger Games is one of my fundamental stories, right? When I think about like the books that really shaped me into a reader, The Hunger Games is definitely one of the books that's at the top of the list. And so in All of Us Are Villains, we follow this like community or world where there are like 7 or 8 families that are competing to be in power, but the way that they decide who's going to be in power is like the kids compete in like this like Hunger Games style thing, which like really seems kind of fucked up that like this 13 or 14-year-old has to go out there and essentially like die for their family to be in power, but it's up my alley, okay? It's up my alley. And you know, saying that out loud is making me have some internal thoughts about things I should probably work out. But regardless, I'm excited to get into this. Any comparison to the Hunger Games, and I'm in there like swimwear, okay? I think it's going to be 5 stars. So one thing I don't like about books is when they are thick AF, you know? So when a book is hitting over 450, 500 pages, I'm almost like immediately no. Absolutely not. But I've heard so many good things about The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. So in The Rage of Dragons, you know, sometimes people are born into having magic. So in this world, 1 out of every 2,000 women have the ability to harness dragons, and like 1 in every like 100 men have like really good fighting abilities. And then there's other people who are just regular Joes, right? And they're still tasked to fight in the wars they have, and they just kind of have to rely on their own natural abilities and strengths, etc., etc. And so we are following Tao, and Tao is one of these I think they call them Fonders, which is like one of these regular people, right? And he's like, how can I get out of this war? And so in his head, he's like, if I get hurt, then they can't use me as like a soldier or a fighter. But then things kind of turn around on him and things don't go as planned. Again, while this is a big book, you know, I really do want to try to expand my reading and get into more like epic adult fantasies. And this is definitely, I feel like, an epic fantasy. There's a couple people I follow on Instagram that we have similar like sci-fi reading taste and like fantasy reading taste, and they always recommend The Rage of Dragons. So maybe my Bookstagram friends know me better than I know myself, and I'm gonna give it a go. And we always want to support a Black author that is writing fantasy, and I'm here for it. So the last like sci-fi fantasy book I'm going to talk about is The 3-Body Problem by Shijing Liu, and this is literally one of my most anticipated reads that's like currently sitting on my shelf. I have had this book on my TBR for such a long time, and I just recently bought a copy of it a couple months ago, and so now that I have it in my hands, I'm like really itching to read it. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm in the right mood for it first. And I'm excited because this is a translated work, and I really haven't read that many translated works before, and I'm like, I might as well start with this one. And this is another book that I probably could describe well to you, but I'm just gonna read the inside flap because I just want you to get all the excitement for it that I have. So it says, set against the backdrop of China's Cultural Revolution, a secret military project, we like secrets, sends signals into space in an attempt to make contact with aliens. Another thing I like, aliens, okay? My necklace right now says Earthling, but you know, we fuck with aliens. An alien civilization on the brink of destruction captures the signal and plans to invade Earth. Now on Earth, different camps start forming, planning to either welcome the superior beings and help them take over a world seen as corrupt, or to fight against the invasion. The result is a science fiction masterpiece of enormous scope and vision. Listen, this seems so good. And, you know, just a peek into my brain, I talk about this with my friends. I'm not gonna say all the time, but occasionally, that if aliens did come down to Earth, I'd be like, listen, just beam me up back with you, because the current state of the planet is just horrible. Okay, specifically the United States of America. You know, we'd love to keep our rights, but anyway, I'm excited to get into this one, and I think I'm gonna get into this one soon, so stay tuned for some vlogs that this might be popping up in. Okay, so we have 4 books left. I know I've been talking long enough, and so the next 2 I'm gonna talk about kind of fall into like a mystery horror type of vibe. And so the first one is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. So this follows a group of friends that they are coming back for like a college reunion, and while they were in college, one of their friends actually got murdered, and it kind of just like disbanded their entire friend group. And so at this reunion, the murder kind of gets revisited, and we're trying to figure out who did it. So as I was reading the synopsis for this, it was really giving me like dark academia vibes, right? And there have been a couple of books that I've read in the last couple of years that have been within the dark academia like subgenre that I've really enjoyed. So one of those was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and the second one is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And especially If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio seems very similar to this. I just feel like I'm really going to enjoy this because, you know, there's only a certain amount of characters that could possibly be the murderer, and I love trying to like figure it out. I almost never write, or I can never actually guess who it's going to be. Which I should be better at by now, but I'm not. It's fine. Kayla from Books and Lala and Gabby from Gabby Reads, I have very similar like mystery thriller taste to them, and both of them really enjoyed this book. So I think I'm gonna end up giving this one 5 stars, but we'll see. Okay, and then up next is more on the horror vibe. So we have The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. So this has been sitting on my shelves for way too long. And I actually bought another Stephen Graham Jones book after this, and I read that one first, and that was The Night of the Mannequins, which is like a shorter horror novella from this author, and I really enjoyed that. It was giving me very like conceptual creepy vibes. You know, sometimes books aren't like boo scary, but just the concept itself is like terrifying. So I've heard that just like the way that this author writes is all of his books are kind of like that. So I'm excited to finally get to like a full-length novel of his. So in this book, there are some hunters that kill an elk, right? And then 10 years later, they are being hunted themselves. They're not sure what they're being hunted by, but really, that's all I need to know to go into this. Along with Stephen Graham Jones writing, I can just already feel that like the vibes are going to be really eerie if these men are being hunted, and like the spirit, like some type of spirit is kind of haunting them. And you know, I always say I don't really fuck with spirits, but I be reading a lot of books that have spirits for someone who doesn't fuck with spirits, but I think I like being scared sometimes, and I think this book is gonna scare me. And if it's a horror book and it scares me, it's doing its job, all right? And I'm gonna give 5 stars to a book that's doing its job. You know what I mean? Okay, up next is a book I'm not really even sure what genre it is, but I still think it's going to be 5 stars, and that is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. So We Ride Upon Sticks follows a group of girls on a hockey team set in the 1980s, and it's also set in Massachusetts, similar to where the Salem witch trials were held. And so this book is not only giving me like 80s vibes, which I love a good 80s movie, and so I'm hoping it gives me that type of feeling, but also it's giving me witchy vibes, which I really like. So the hockey team is using like a collective brain or like groupthink as they play, you know, so I don't even know what the actual plot of this book is other than like the witchy hockey 1980s part of it, but I don't think I've ever read anything like this. I'm thinking that this is going to end up being 5 stars for me because things that I haven't read before, you know, they're kind of novel, right? And so sometimes when I read things that are very novel in my head, I'm like, wow, you get 5 stars because I've never read anything like this before. All right, and the last book that I'm gonna put on this 5-star prediction list is actually a nonfiction book, and I don't read that much nonfiction, but that is the 1619 Project by Nicole Hannah Jones. This book has been going around my Bookstagram for a while now, and nobody has any bad thing to say about it. Well, except for our government, and it's already being put on like book ban lists or whatever, and I'm like, oh, that means this book is spitting facts. So the 1619 Project essentially just catalogs the entire Black American experience from 1619 all the way up until now. So not only just like the history of, you know, slavery and, you know, Jim Crow and all of those things, but how they actually affect how we live today and how things in the past still have ramifications on the Black experience in America. And I'm just so intrigued to get into this. It's definitely a chunker, and you know, the text in it is like real small. It's giving real you know, textbook vibes, which is okay. I just know that I'm gonna have to take my time to read this one. I'm just really excited to get into this one. I think we're gonna read this one as a family. My stepdad is very into history, and I think he's actually already started this, and it's also slow going for him, but yeah, I'm very confident that this is gonna be a 5-star read. All right, and so that wraps up my 5-star predictions for the rest of the year. Hopefully I actually get to all of these books, but we'll see. You know, we're gonna give myself some grace. But let me know down below in the comments if you've read any of these books. Did you give them 5 stars? Or let me know down below what are a couple of your 5-star predictions for yourself for the rest of 2022. And as always, if you've made it to the end of this video, you are my favorite. Like, top of the list, #1, my favorite. And I will see you guys in the next ones, my little tater tots. Bye.